Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Tim Sales. I've met him many years ago, and at the time it was a generic event, and I learned more from him over the years that followed than anyone else I could say that were in my upline in my other company. And one day, I don't know if I can call this luck, but I've had the pleasure of being able to work with Tim, and that's when everything started to change for me. I started to have success, and he definitely is the guy responsible for a lot of the greatness in this industry, and we have the pleasure to have him here as our master distributor. And today what we're going to talk about is the MLM objection. And so pay close attention, notes. I hope that you have paper handy, a pen, because there's going to be a lot of great information here to write down and memorize. You got to learn how to do, answer this objection. This is probably one of the, I would say, toughest objection, because you can have the best company, the best product, compensation plan. You have everything lined up. But if people don't see themselves doing it, then you won't have much success with this. So you need to be able to handle that objection, so this way people can see themselves doing it, and then everything else, company, product, is going to be lined up to really help your prospects. So, Tim, I would like to ask you a question here is, what are your thoughts on this specific objection? What can you bring here to help people understand this objection?
Well, thank you both very much. To answer that question, unfortunately, it has been so long since I've been in the industry, or out of the industry. For those of you that don't know, I came into this industry in 1989, and I came in without any objection to the industry because I had never heard of the industry. And, of course, I've been around the objection. I've heard the objection thousands and thousands of times. And today I sit in a situation to where I honestly can't even fathom the objection because my life has been just so incredibly blessed with the industry. I had the fun activity of I was traveling from right around Tampa, Florida, going across the state of Florida with a gentleman that some of you probably know. His name is Steve Schwartz. And we were traveling across to pick up a car that I had purchased on the other coast. And I don't get out much is kind of the funny phenomenon, because I work from home. If I want to go to a movie, I typically go to a matinee. If I want to play a game of golf, I typically go on a Tuesday at around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And so I don't get out much, but this particular time that I could pick up the car had me leaving, traveling across, and I was sitting in traffic, unbelievable traffic at that. And I was looking to my left and to my right, and I was looking at the misery in everyone's face. And I looked over at Steve, and I said, are these the people who are objecting to network marketing? I can't imagine 2 days sitting in traffic like this, and this is everyone's life. I can't even fathom this thing. What are they objecting to? There must be some kind of boogeyman or something that isn't real. You know, it's that ghost that's underneath your bed when you're a kid. It's not real. They put up a block, or they put up an image of something that is fallacy. And the reason that I say this is that if anyone just looks around and weighs the options that are available to them in the workplace, you've got an option of working in a traditional type of an employment scenario, right? And so that scenario, to me, is nowhere near network marketing. All right, so let me just play this out as I understand it. I have been in the job market before I went into the military. And so it was one of those scenarios where I go and I ask, really beg to go to work. And then that person pays me some sort of a salary based upon what I might have gotten before or their interpretation of what my value is. And so, I punch the clock when I go in, I work all day long, and I punch the clock going out. And I don't believe that anybody thinks or even fathoms that they can ever have, like a dreamful life in that scenario, unless it's a job that you just absolutely adore. Normally a person who adores the job that they do are that kind of a person who enjoys whatever they do. I was that guy. I was changing tires at Firestone, and I loved anything that I did. In other words, it was just fun to me. So that's one scenario, and you might have a little bit of a better job, or the person that you're talking to has a little bit better job than changing tires. But nonetheless, when you pay your taxes and then you expense the things out for your living expenses, your rent, and so forth, it doesn't leave you any kind of a lifestyle, and you're kind of stuck to that type of a life. And then the second option is you go into some sort of a traditional business ownership, and traditional meaning that a professional, a doctor, an attorney, chiropractor, that sort of a thing, you own your own business, but what you've basically done is that you've built the entire business around yourself. And so if you're not cracking backs or cleaning teeth or helping someone in some sort of a way, like an attorney or a doctor, then you're not really getting paid. You might be able to get $100, $200, $300 an hour for that, but you don't get paid unless you're doing that. And if you go away on some sort of an extended type of a vacation, and I'm talking 2, 3, 4 weeks, then a lot of time your client base will leave you. Certain parts of them will, a number of them will leave you. And so hopefully what you're doing there is that over 10, 20 years you build up a clientele that you somehow try to convince some other professional to buy your customer base. And that's the dream there. And it is not, when I compare that to network marketing, it is very difficult for me to say, I would choose that one, because I'm probably going to go to school for 8 to 12 years, and I'm going to have a big bill. All right, the student loans are astronomical in that type of a scenario, and so I will probably work half my career just to try to pay that back. So then you look at the other options of owning your own business, which will logically lead to probably the most successful of all types of business ownership, which is franchising. And if you run down the list of franchises, and I have, because I like to compare and see what's going on out there, you can get a McDonald's. I think everybody knows that one, and that's $1 million. And if you really wanted to serve that sort of a product to consumers, knowing that it is not healthy, it's going to harm them, a Subway sandwich, you've got $100,000 to pay for that, and you got to understand what you're paying for that. You're paying the fee, and the fee is the right to receive the training, all right, and use the identity of that franchise. And so for $100,000, you get the right to use the Subway identity, and then they will train you on how to set up your business. You still got to get your business. In other words, you still have to rent the space and then hire the employees. Okay, so anytime somebody says, I don't like the recruiting aspect of network marketing. And I say, well, if you're not recruiting to get people into your business, then you will not be successful also in any kind of a franchise or any other kind of business ownership, because the process is the same. You're going to have to find people to help you with your business. And and just some of the other franchise fees. If you wanted to get a Cold Stone, it's $292,000. A GNC, $160,000. If you want to clean houses, you can get Mary Maid franchise for $55,000. Massage Envy for $343,000. And again, you have to understand what that franchise fee is. This is the part that startles me and confuses me. And that is that franchise fee is for the right to have that identity and to receive training. All the other expenses you're going to have to bear. So any license that you have to get, any types of a lease on a building, all of those things. Now, I want you to think of a franchise, any one of them that you've ever seen. And I want you to just picture it in Google Maps where you draw a circle that is a 15 to 20 minute drive. All right, so drive time, 15 to 20 minutes. I want you to take a circle around the spot where you want to have your franchise. That is where your customers are going to come from. And that's it. You'll have an occasional tourist who drives through, but by and large, your customer base is going to come from a 15 to 20 minute drive. Because why else would they come to your location? Right? Okay, so the most that you could ever service is a 15 to 20 minute drive, a radius around your franchise area or your business area. The reason I'm so close to this one is because when I made my money, and I retired in 1996, so I joined the business in 1989 and I retired in 1996. And after a couple of years, I had a whole lot of money. I could have bought several franchises, and I was planning on doing that in just kind of a passive thing. So I would buy the franchise, I'd pay the fee, I'd go through the training, and then I would hire a manager of sorts to manage the franchise. And then I would receive the money. And so I went in and I figured out exactly how much that it would take. But there's one part that I could never overcome, and the reason that I never pulled the trigger and actually purchased a franchise is because of that geographic limitation. At one time, I remember looking at a franchise on the beach, and this was in Florida, on the west coast of Florida, and so it fronts up to the Gulf of Mexico. And if you'll remember, there was a BP oil spill, and there was black tar that was washing up onto the beach, and so the oil would basically harden and turn into a rubbery type of a tar that would roll up onto the beach. And the beach traffic, nobody wanted to go to the beach and go swimming in the tar. And so the traffic died down to almost nothing. Well, how many months do you think that a franchise owner who has his franchise on the beach, how many months do you think that he can handle that before he has to file bankruptcy? All right, so in a geographic limitation, what you've got there is that you are completely vulnerable. Right? You're vulnerable to anything that occurs in that area. And so if there's a hurricane, if there's a flood, if there's tar rolling up on the beach or anything else, so it's not just that you circle a 15 to 20 minute radius around your franchise. You also have that there can be something that go wrong. And I mean, who's going to cover that? No one's going to cover that. So the reason I bring these things up to you is that I know the objections in network marketing. The objections are, number one, is finding a company that's going to go long term. But you know what? There's not a single business in the world that doesn't have that issue. Just because you buy a McDonald's franchise doesn't mean that's going to be successful. All right? It's a little bit of a higher statistic. In other words, the options of success in a franchise are a little tiny bit higher than a traditional business owner has, but it's still, there is the limitations of that. So the one objection to network marketing is finding a company going long term. Well, if you're on this call, you're an RX or seriously considering RX, and so that issue has pretty much been handled for you. The second objection to network marketing is you have to get customers. Well, what business don't you have to get customers in? Anybody want to let me in on that secret? because the very act of business is serving a customer with a product or a service. And so just because you have one doesn't mean that you have customers. Just because you have a product doesn't mean you have customers. Just because you put a franchise in a location does not mean that customers are going to come to you. You have to then go out and reach, right? So the whole idea behind getting a business inside of a city is that you get a little bit of foot traffic, all right? So you hope you get that real estate spot right in the right one where you've got foot traffic coming by. But that normally is not enough. You're going to have to go out and reach out for the customer. You run ads, you do radio spots, you offer specials, you do whatever you can to get customers to come in. And so there is no business that I'm aware of that you don't have to get customers. And so that's objection number 2, but you have that with every business in the world. Objection number 3 is that you have to recruit people. Or in traditional business, you hire them. All right, so let's just weigh the differences between recruiting someone versus hiring someone. Anyone who is on this call who has hired employees before, you know and I know that I don't need to say anything more. You're already chuckling over there. Because if you've ever had the luxury of hiring employees, you know, number one is that it's very, very tough because they come in and they hand you a resume. And that resume is full of their best light. They put themselves in the very best light that they possibly can. And the first 2 or 3 weeks, it's a honeymoon time frame. They'll do anything for you. And then, a little tiny thing goes a little bit wrong. They're 10 minutes later, so they come in and they apologize. And you say it's okay. And the next day it's okay. And then the day after that, they come in about 15 minutes late. Or then they call in and they have some reason that's very, very important and they can't come in that day. Well, you needed them that day. And this goes on and on and on. And if you let them go, then you stand a risk of being sued by them. All right? In other words, that is not a glorious event over there in the hiring of employees. And I don't know a business that you don't have to hire employees in. If it is, it's a very tiny one. And it's not going to really blossom into what people dream of building a business, being able to walk away from it, having the financial resources to enjoy their life. All right, so given the option, okay, so what I just laid out to you is a whole list of options other than network marketing. And then I told you all the objections, all the problems of network marketing, and I know them very, very well. I would always prefer to recruit people instead of hiring employees. All right? And here's the primary reason why. Is because when they come to you, they're not handing you a resume showing you their best light. And so what you talk to when you get them on the phone is who they really are. And do you know how many of those people you would have actually hired and not known it? And you might pay them $2,000, $3,000 a month for 3 or 4 or 5 months before you finally have to let them go. And then you're going to have to pay unemployment insurance, and you're going to have to pay all kinds of additional things with that. Fed, FICA, all of the additional expenses, and your business is pouring out for those people. And so when I get a prospect on the phone, and they're not great, they're not so nice to me, I always think, you know what, I might have made a mistake and hired that guy if I'd have been looking for an employee. And so given the options of doing network marketing as a business versus an employment, me working for somebody else, I'll always choose network marketing. Buying a franchise, paying the fee for the right to use the identity and to get trained, I will always choose network marketing. And when I look at the objections of getting customers, I got to get them anywhere. And so the only thing that's left is recruiting and finding other people to be in business with me. And I will always prefer that. And so as bad as it ever gets is the greatest that I could ever imagine. And so this talk, this whole conversation this morning is about handling the MLM objection. And I told you that I find it hard to handle the objection sometimes today because I'm so spoiled. I'm so spoiled because I've already come over that hurdle. I've already come over that, wait a minute, there isn't anything better. I'm not saying it's the only thing in existence. I'm saying that for me and for the average person, and even for the people who are used to making $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year, this is still the very, very best option. And so with that, knowing that I have a very, very difficult time overcoming it, I'll tell you how I normally handle this objection. Number one is that I'm not going to go off of anything that Stefan and Arlene haven't already taught you. All right? In other words, what I taught them how to handle this objection is that I have to first humble myself down, forget all that I know about how fabulous this industry is, how fabulous RX is, what a rare occasion that you have, and I listen all the way through the objection. All right? So I have to determine right up front exactly what is it that this person is objecting to. And so I listen all the way through, whatever they're saying. And if they've got some baggage, that's okay. All right? So if you've ever dated anybody in a relationship and they came from a relationship previously, then they're normally toting some baggage. And so, okay, all right, it's all right. That doesn't make them bad. And they're just toting some baggage. All right? So I listen all the way through. And then I make sure that I really get the right objection. Because just because somebody says, is it one of those pyramid schemes, doesn't mean that I really understand what they're objecting to. And so I've got to listen through and confirm that what their objection is exactly what I'm about to say. Because the last thing that, going to answer. Because the last thing that you want to do is to go and handle the objection that they don't have. And so that's the reason that you have to confirm what that objection actually is. And then I want to validate that person. All right, I'm not necessarily validating the objection, but I'm validating that person, and I'm letting them know that they're free to talk and explain to me what their concerns are. Because as long as they have an objection, all right, it's normally due to lack of understanding, but if they have an objection, then they basically got a block. They've got something that is prohibiting them from moving forward. And so normally it takes understanding, it takes explanation, it takes them opening up, and a lot of times a person can't really open up until they're given the right to speak their mind. And so I'll listen all the way through there, and I'll validate whatever their objection actually is. And then after I get done with that is that I want to handle that objection. But kind of the skill of this really comes down to you not actually handling it. It is the skill of you facilitating handling it. And what I mean by that is that you ask them questions so that they handle it themselves. And that came from years of trying to give them the right answer. And very rarely can you come up with the right answer. The more that you learn, the more you study this industry, the more that you're on conference calls like this, and that you gain a better understanding of this industry, it means that you're going to be able to have the knowledge in your head so that you can ask the appropriate questions that cause the prospect to step over that objection on their own. Okay, so let me give you an example of how that might work. You just heard this conversation, and so you could, when somebody is ranting about not wanting to recruit or something, you can say, well, what are you comparing it to? Are you looking at some other kind of business that you're looking to work? Or are you planning on hiring employees? How do you see hiring employees compared to recruiting? And the person says, yeah, well, I don't have to talk to my friends and blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, all right, I understand that. And so, how are you planning on hiring employees? And they say, well, running ads in the newspaper. Okay, good. Well, why don't you run ads in the newspaper to recruit? Because really, Is there a whole lot of difference between recruiting for a network marketing company and hiring employees? Well, yeah, I would be paying them to come to work for me. Oh, and you think that's nice? So you're going to pay them, $2,000, $3,000 a month to test them out? Well, I'd much rather just pay an extra $2,000 or $3,000 a month in advertising to recruit somebody who's going to then go to work and build their own business. How do you see that differently? So you're basically using the knowledge that you gained on this conference call to be able to then facilitate helping that person gain an understanding that the boogeyman of network marketing isn't Snow Gnarly, but the boogeyman of hiring employees can be quite gnarly. So that would be an example of how to facilitate helping someone pass their own objection. And as some of you have heard me talk about before, I learned something very, very valuable in this area, and that is that oftentimes I was handling an objection that wasn't really the objection. And so you have to listen very, very closely while that person is telling you what their objection is, because very often you'll find that the real objection is they don't feel as though they can do it. And so in your handling of an objection, what I always try to do is talk to them about training. Talk to them about how, I'm going to walk them through step by step, train them how to do it, because I'd not, if somebody gives me the objection of my wife doesn't want me to do it, I can guarantee you that person is sitting on an objection called I can't do it. Can't meaning not that his wife won't let him. Can't is that he doesn't have the confidence that if he went to work, he would be able to do the business. Because I assure you, if he brings in a $100,000 a month check, his wife will be absolutely fine with him doing it. I've never, ever, ever had that objection be actually real. Because as soon as I get into the specifics of the training, how, step by step and those sorts of things, then that objection with the spouse goes away. Or invite the wife. If you're really talking to the wife via the husband, in other words, the husband saying, my wife doesn't want me to do it, well, then obviously you need to be talking to the wife. Because if she's restraining it, then she doesn't think her husband can do it, or something like that. So you'd want to involve the wife in that. So the point that I'm making here is that I'm not going. I don't teach and I don't do anything that I haven't already taught to Stefan and Arlene, and so I know that they have been working through the objection handling remedy, and I can assure you that when you execute that correctly, it works. And now, hopefully, with this little bit of an extra information that I've given you here about how to compare network marketing to any other business that your prospect might be looking at, then hopefully that'll help you. If I can open the lines up, I don't know if the volume of people is going to make it too messy, too loud, too crazy, but I'd love to hear from you. Hear any specifics that you have going on that I might be able to help you with. Arlene, can you help me open it?
Yes, I'll go ahead and open it, and if it's too noisy, then we'll see if we have another way of doing this. So here we go. So if you guys would please mute your phones, hit the mute button, or however you mute your phones, it would be very much appreciated. But we'd also like to have any questions or comments too. Stefan, if you have any that you'd like to help us with.
Yes. Well, that's the time for you guys. You have the chance to speak with Tim and get his feedback on this objection. Has anyone ever been faced, with this objection? You've been on the phone or you've been talking to family members, and this objection comes up. They just don't see themselves doing it or whatever. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions, that's the right time to ask.
Stefan and Tim and Arlene, this is Patty in Boston. I have a question for you.
Patty.
Can you talk a little bit more about validating the person? Because sometimes it's difficult to determine whether I'm agreeing with them or validating them.
Okay. Give me an example that you've received